Hello! I don't even need this mic, just so you know I wanted to... Welcome to the Big Money Stylist Podcast. We actually changed our podcast studio around a little bit. We used to have headsets, and we'd actually have to talk into the mic, and now we actually have these little boxes. I don't even know why I grabbed the mic, though. Obviously, if you're listening and not watching, I grabbed the mic like I was an announcer, and I'm like, and...
All right, Bruno Mars, calm down over there.
I gotta reel it in. All right, it's Tuesday, guys, which means you're listening to the Big Money Stylist Podcast. I am your host. This is my co-host, Ani Rivera. Hello. And every week we try to bring more value to artists. I've had a lot of people message. I don't know why I'm just talking to this damn mic.
It's habit.
Okay, it's habit. Well, we've had a lot of people like that don't do hair that just are like, oh my god, I love your guys' podcast. It's so great. We're just here sharing life and problems and stuff.
Can we talk about what happened today?
What happened today? Oh, the power.
Dude, I woke up at 3:45 this morning.
Could you not sleep because of the wind?
Okay, no, my boyfriend gets up at 3:45 to work out. It's
That's
stupid.
not normal.
Yeah, but he insists on it. He sleeps with pre-workout beside him. The first alarm goes off, he drinks pre-workout right out of bed. Yes, he does.
I actually drink pre-workout right out of the bed too because I like
he's
to go.
so committed, and I'm like, ugh, I'm like a fucking troll, like it. Head under covers, don't wake me up. But yeah, all of a sudden, I woke up and I was like, what the fuck? I heard something weird, and so my bedroom lights are hooked to Alexa, so I was like, Alexa, turn the lights on, and it didn't do it. I'm like, Alexa.
That's so weird.
Well,
my power didn't go out.
My power went completely out, so that's when I realized. And then I'm going outside, I'm like, what the fuck? Everything was out. I came into the office. All four of our offices had no power. It's been a disaster all morning.
It's funny, I was like, I wonder if my gym's open because my gym is in the same complex.
Yeah.
And everyone's just in there working out, like just lifting weights. There's no lights, there's no music, there's like nothing. I'm like, oh. And then there was like one girl, it's like, oh shoot, I can't run on the treadmill. But that's like the only thing that we couldn't use. I was like, oh, and my power didn't go out, but it was so windy. I slept like shit last night. Like,
do you know, I was worried. For some reason,
I thought my house was gonna blow over.
Well, I didn't put my car in the garage last night.
Oh.
And had I done that, I don't know how to manually open it.
Oh, because it would have been shut. Oh, how...
Yeah.
Oh, so it's a good thing you didn't.
Fuck, yeah. I never would have made it to work.
You know what's so funny is I was like, oh, Garrett like went for a run in the wind this morning, and I'm like, oh, maybe I'll go for a run. I go outside, literally, I thought my eyelashes were going to blow off my face. That's how windy it was. I was like, I can't see.
I walked out, I was like, oh, this is cold. Grabbing the North Face, putting jeans on, boots.
I do. This is warm.
Dude, I have wool socks on. I'm fucking freezing.
Yeah, it's weird. It took a real cold turn.
Dude,
okay,
You have some big news.
No, I can't share it yet. I'll share it next week.
No, I was talking about the thing you did this weekend.
What did I do this weekend?
Yesterday. The thing you did yesterday. We just talked about
Oh, yeah. I'm like, no, I can't share that news yet. It's not final.
Damn it, not that, Danielle.
We'll tell that news next week when it's signed. Yes, no, what was I talking? Oh, I went to church, guys.
And bear in mind, this podcast is not about to turn religious, but this was interesting.
No, it was interesting. I was raised Mormon, and probably about 10 years ago, we decided no longer to practice being Mormon and kind of went our own way. Since in the last 10 years, we have tried like a million different Christian churches. And depending on who is it, the pastor or the preacher? For a Christian church, it's not.
I mean, for Catholics, it's priests. I think it's priests everywhere.
I don't think it's a priest. I think it's anyway, pastor. I think it's pastor.
A pastor.
Pastor.
Pasture is
all right.
With Palsy.
I've tried like so many different Christian churches, and some of them are better than others. And a friend of mine was like, "You need to come to this church," and I was like, listen, I've been to a lot of them. Like, I get more spiritual time, like, in my own, like, jogs in the morning and, like, studying my own stuff. Like, I don't want to go to church. And I finally was like, you know what? I told Garrett, I said, I want to, like, switch up our Sunday routine. Because I feel like sometimes on Sunday we end up working or doing other stuff. And I'm like, I want to switch up our Sunday routine. Let's go to church. She's like, okay. So my two older girls couldn't get out of bed. And so me and Isla and Garrett just went. And I'm going to just call him a speaker because I don't know what they're called at this point.
I swear to God, it's a priest.
Is it a priest? I think it's a pastor. Anyways, he was so good. Like, I don't cry often, and I cried.
You cried at church?
I cried like 4 times in church.
Oh
I was
my
like,
God.
I was like, don't look directly at him. Don't.
Really?
I have never, like, so in the Mormon culture, they call it like feeling the Holy Spirit or whatever. When, like when you just like feel like your heart's on fire kind of thing.
Yeah.
I felt that. I was like, wow, this is nice. I'm like, have I just been like some cold-hearted asshole?
I was like, what's about to come out of her mouth?
But no, and not to go like talking about like the religious type of thing, but I realize is the biggest message I got from him yesterday is living your purpose or having your passion or whatever it is really, I call it in the pocket. Like if you're in the pocket of life, like you could have $1 zillion, but if you're not in the pocket, you wish you were in the pocket, which means like you love what you do, right?
Yeah.
You feel like you are called to do what you're doing, which I know you shared this with me multiple times. Like we were like, no, we're supposed to be here. This is our path. We're helping artists. Like we feel very called to what we're doing, which is like essentially finding your purpose, right? And that can give you the biggest high. Like you can't get that high anywhere else. You can't get that high from drugs, from alcohol, from shopping. Like you cannot get that high from anything else. And so he kind of tied it into like, you know, God and Holy Spirit and that. He's like, the biggest rush I need is with God. And I thought, you know, for me, like I understand that because I feel so fulfilled like doing what I'm doing, and that's what pushes me to continue to grow as an individual. And ultimately I think when you're serving other people, that's what life's about as well. Is when you can serve other people, like you've just tapped into like a whole nother universe.
I mean, and I get it. And I'll say I'm not religious. I feel I'm very, very spiritual, like extremely, but I was raised Catholic and I don't adhere to like organized religion very well, so whatever. But I do think even like I think to like all of our events, and something that Garrett and I used to laugh about, like when I really started working here about 3 years ago, is after every
Church
event,
of BMS.
the Church of BMS. Oh, just kidding. But no, like even after an event day or like an event week or like 3 days, whatever it is, Garrett would always laugh and he'd be like, "You're gonna need a minute to like almost like come back down off the high." And I'd be like,
it's so true.
yeah. And first I was like, no. But then at night after the first day, I'd be like, that was great. That was fucking awesome. Let's do it again. Oh my God. And you're just, I would ride this high that's still to this day.
You'd be exhausted, but you're like, that was awesome.
That was awesome. Well, even like our classes back in November, it was after day one of one of our classes, given we had 5 in a row.
Right.
I came home and my boyfriend came over and he was making dinner and I'm just like, yeah, because this was great and that was great. And then I'm sending boxes and I'm like, yeah, because tomorrow and then for the next lesson, for this and that. It literally took me an hour to like fucking calm down. I was pacing my house the entire time to the point where like 45 minutes in, I was like, I don't think I've said 5 words. And I was like, I'm so sorry. I'm almost done. And he's like, honestly, this is just kind of entertaining. Like you do
But sometimes
you.
it's like we get in events or we get in a situation where we are just like, go, 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 go. So it's like you almost need a minute to like process what happened. And you're like, whoa, you know what I mean? Like, even when we did hair this last weekend, so we should talk about that too. That's a good thing to talk about on the podcast. So Teresa from New Jersey Housewives came down and Garrett's actually good friends with her boyfriend right now, and it was so funny because he was like, "Do you want to hang out?" And I was like, "Sure." Well, he's like, "Do you want to go to dinner with him or something?" And I'm like, "Sure." If it happens, it happens. If not, no worries. And we ended up staying at the same hotel. Coincidentally, we literally ran into them on the way like to our cars, and I like talked to her, and I'm like, "Hey, you should really get these extensions. You'd love MBR." And she's like, "Oh my God, I would love to." And I'm like, "Yeah, like I'll text you tomorrow. I'll take care of you." Literally, I text her in the morning. I'm like, "Hey." Well, I text Ani that night. I'm like, "Hey, I just ran into Teresa, and you might need to come into the salon with me because we're closed on Saturdays." And I'm like, whatever. And so we text back and forth. She's actually like super.
So rad.
I don't really watch the show, so I just appreciate, or I just like met her for who she is in that moment.
Dude,
you know what I mean?
I felt like such a dick because I've never seen any of these shows.
I know.
And her friend was like, said something about the show, and I'm like, "Oh, how long have you been doing it?" She's like, 11 years. I was like,
yeah, no, I knew she was like the OG of like the Jersey Housewives,
honestly,
but I
knew nothing.
And I knew a little bit of her story, but I don't watch TV. And I told her, I'm like, I apologize, like I don't watch TV. Like obviously I know who you are, but But she was like super cool and super chill. But it was so funny because what Ani and I did that day,
dude,
like if you're a student and you're listening to this, we need to tell you what we did so that you can actually appreciate our timing. So she had single bond extensions in, and usually those don't take more than an hour to take out. But she had so many. She had like more than I've ever seen in my...
Hundreds.
Like I've never seen that many.
So I will say, I've used to do this kind. She had hundreds. The pile of hair on the ground. Dude, it took us 2 hours.
Our hands because the stuff you take it out is basically acetone.
It is.
It ate our hands. Like I looked down and I was like, both of us, our hands. I'm like, oh my god.
Like I have 2 blisters, one on each hand. I have a cut on 2 separate fingers, and then that second knuckle of my whole hand is raw.
But what's so cool about what happened, and again, if you're not one of our students, maybe you won't appreciate what I'm about to tell you. But her and her friend came in. It took us 2 hours just to get her extensions out, and then we custom colored her extensions and put them back in her hair. And her friend, we colored her hair completely and put extensions in her hair in how many hours, Ani?
2.5 hours.
Not the
Total?
whole thing. Total.
4.5.
4.5 for 2 brand new installs. Remind you that 2 of those hours were just removing the extensions.
Yeah, so we actually did 2 installs, 3.5 rows total between the 2 in 2.5 hours. Let me tell you, look, you want to talk about the one thing you should be learning? Fucking communication and having a good partner.
I felt like we were one. We were like Obi-Wan Kenobi.
We were, look at you with the fucking references. Okay.
Literally, it was like we were like reading it. I was like, I'm gonna need you to curl. I'm gonna stitch over here. Like, I've never worked that fast in my entire life.
I'm like, Danielle, you start beating this. I'm gonna do this. Okay, place the hair. Okay, I'm gonna stitch. You beat here. Then I'm gonna do this. You do that.
While she was finishing stitching and rounding the corner because they had to go to a marketing meeting. So, anyways, it was actually a really cool experience. And even after we got done doing hair, I'm like, okay, she was super rad, but what the fuck? We have never, I think we were just jazzed about,
We both went home. I got home, sat there for about 5 minutes, then I text her, I was like, bruh, dude. She's like, dude.
I feel like I needed a smoke. I was like,
nailed it.
But it was a good experience.
But you know what? Even though, our hands were pretty raw after, honestly, mine still are today.
Yeah, no, mine are too.
Yeah. So even though, it was, our hands are pretty raw, we've never worked so fast or so cohesively in our lives. Even going back to purpose, we loved it. Mm-hmm. It wasn't who we were doing, it was what we were doing, and the fact that truly there's nobody faster than you and I.
But that's why I was so excited. You think I would have been texting you excited that we did her hair, which again, it was cool.
Cool.
I was just really excited to what we accomplished in those hours. I was like, I fucking love my job.
Well, and that's the thing, there's nobody faster than me and you. That's a simple fact. There just isn't. But even inside of that, we had to push ourselves so hard to be able to accomplish that. And I feel very rarely are we pushed to such extremes.
Yeah, right. And that's why I said nobody can appreciate it unless you're one of our students. You'd be like, whoa.
That was gnarly.
And it's so funny because I'm sure, all artists can appreciate this is we're taught in hair school you're a duck. On the outside, you're calm, you're cool, you're collective. Your client comes in, they need a color correction, or they've shaved half their head, and you're like, no problem, absolutely, totally I can do that. We're here for you. And underneath, you're like, paddle. And sometimes shit goes sideways at the salon. It's pretty predictable, but then it's also not predictable.
Guys, it's still chemicals.
It's an art and it's a science. And sometimes you're there's nothing you can do, and you get into this place and you might have multiple clients and you're like, whoa. And that's really when your capacity goes up as an artist, though, honestly. If we want to switch topics and even go into capacity, when you can push your capacity in whatever you do, it makes it more fun because you're learning and growing. And I think that really creates an obsession with what you do and creates purpose even there, is when you push those boundaries and you push your capacity.
But I really think that capacity and purpose go together because honestly, and I'll use myself as a perfect example, I like working out, not obsessed with it. It's not a passion of mine. So am I going to push myself to the extreme if you can get me to work out? No, I'm not. Why? Because I don't fucking care. Honestly, I don't. I'm 98 pounds. Give me a break. Whatever. So, but I feel but when you love something and you're kind of a little obsessed with it and it is your purpose and your passion, you get so much from it, you can't help but want to push yourself.
Right.
You can't help but want to do it more and more, and that's when those go together. So even and I think, God, it's such a bummer when I hear people even our age, I'm about to turn 31, you're 36, 37?
Thank you.
37 it is then.
37.
You said thank you, it's definitely 37. But even 37, I hear people our age, in their 30s, and they're like, haven't found the thing that I'm in love with. And first off, there's nothing wrong with that. That's okay. It takes people sometimes a little bit longer, but I think it is important to like try to find the thing you're so passionate about.
Well, you know what's so crazy, and I'll just share this story. It was an old event. It was a Warrior Women event. Remember that forever ago?
Yeah.
And Garrett's sister, who I don't know how old she is. She's probably late 20s. She's got some kids, and anyways, she wanted to be like an opera singer, and then she had like 3 kids under the age of 3, and like she was just like trying to pay the bills. And I remember at Warrior Women, she stood up and she was like, you know, I think I just need to get a desk job. Like I'm at this point where like I need to pay the bills and maybe I just need to get a desk job. And I literally like walked over to her and I was like, what are you passionate about? And she's like, music. And I was like, okay, so guess what? You have to start somewhere. So I know you think you're like ready for the grand opera, but you're not. And I'm like, so where can you start? Where can you use the skill that you're passionate about right now? I'm like, you could teach music lessons to children if you marketed it correctly and got a handful of, you know, kids or whatever you did, and then you build upon that and you build a brand on that. I'm like, you think you're here and you're not, and you got to start with where you're at and continue to push to where you know you can go.
Well, I think it's because a lot of people, and I'll use that as like a great example, like I want to be in the Grand Opera, I want to be an opera singer, and then people think, well, if I'm not doing that, then it's not worth it, or
That's
like
not worth my time.
Yeah,
and you're
or,
like, but you just were about to take a desk job or work at McDonald's.
like, what the fuck do you mean it's not worth time? Or even like with us in our industry, people are like, I want to be a salon owner, or like I want to be a trainer for MBR, I want to do this, and then it's like, well, and then people look at it and they're like, well, if it's not that grand and that big and that great, then it's not worth it. But okay, hold up. You might look up to people like Danielle or myself or any number of people,
but you don't see the 18 years in my craft that I'm...
Danielle didn't wake up today and be like, I'm going to have a big brand with 400 students at all. Like, she didn't do that. It was little by little of like, okay, I created a method. I'm going to do a class. And then one person showed up for the class.
It's true.
But that's literally true. Like, one person showed up for the class. And then it's like, okay, well, that worked. Maybe now I'll do another class. And then it escalated and grew on top of each other.
Well,
but you have to start somewhere.
And it's so crazy because I always loved doing hair. I went to college for a semester. And then I was like, well, this is a waste of money. I don't even know I was like taking like ceramics and aerobics, and those aren't even real classes.
Wait, aerobics?
Yeah, you can take aerobics in ceramics in college.
What decade were you in college?
Don't worry about it. Yeah, I had like a math and a reading class, and then like I decided to take a few electives, and my mom's like, why are you taking ceramics and aerobics?
Was this like the early 2000s?
Yeah. So, anyways, I went to one semester of college, and then I was like, you know what? I don't know what I want to go into with college, and I was like, I'd rather go get a trade. And I was like, I looked down upon hairdressers. I was kind of like, they don't make any money, like whatever. They're poor. But then I was like, but you know what? I am poor right now, so I'm going to go get a trade, and then maybe I'll go back to college and be a doctor or a lawyer or whatever it is, but at least I have this skill that I'm making more than minimum wage, right? So then I go down this path, and I'm doing hair. I end up getting married pretty young, not pretty young, really young. I got married at 20. And then, Then I had my first baby, got pregnant at 23, had my first baby by 24. And next thing you know, I was like, well, I'm not going back to college. Like, that's not going to happen. But I really enjoy, I had been doing hair kind of the whole time. And I'm like, I really enjoy this whole hair thing. I actually had my first baby and was like, good, I don't have to work anymore. And then I was like, oh, I actually really like work. So I went back to work. But it wasn't until like literally I lost everything. Like, we had no money. And I was like, oh shit. And I remember thinking like, dude, I need to go back to college. I should probably go back to college. And this was after my second baby, so I was 28 at the time. And I'm like, oh my God, what am I gonna do? And then I literally like had to have this moment where I was like, well, what skills do you have right now, Danielle, that you could use? And then I literally, it was like a math game. I was like, well, I know I make the most money doing hair extensions. So guess what? I'm only gonna offer hair extensions. And little by little, I just kept I kept getting better and better and better at my craft to where it was like I took a lot of pride. Yeah. It wasn't even like I enjoyed hair. I took a lot of pride in what I had accomplished and how good I had become at doing my craft. You know what I mean? So then it was like I had to let go of the identity of just being the artist. Like I was like, oh, I had to jump outside the box and become an entrepreneur and do more and do more and do more. And I had to continue to push my capacity. But it's just crazy because I think a lot of times you don't know what you're passionate about until you start to get good at something. Yeah. And you can't get good at something unless you're willing to kind of like submit and be like, okay, this is where I'm at right now, and this is where I want to go. and
Yeah.
you're not going to be an expert overnight.
You're gonna be bad in the beginning.
You're
And
gonna-
honestly, everything.
At anything,
though.
yeah.
Do you know what? And even like inside of my position, because really I do hair 1 day a week I'm 1 day a week behind the chair at the salon, just like Danielle, and I spend most of my time training artists. And I think even now of the things that I do now that a year ago I considered hard, that 3
Yeah.
years ago I considered impossible. Like I remember sitting there, even just now I did hot seats. So in the academy, once a month I do hot seats with really whatever student needs it, and they essentially fill out a form and they're like, this is my problem either inside of my business or my personal life, like fucking help. And it's a one-on-one with me and this artist. And I remember when I first came, and it would be me and Garrett that actually did them. And I would sit there and I'd be like, I can never do this. Like, I'm not this good. Like this, I'm never gonna do this alone. I just did 3 by myself and I got off the call and I'm like, oh, that was great. That was really fun. All right, let's do a podcast. Like, it just things that were once so hard that I was just garbage at. Like, not garbage, I was not great. It was not good. But now I'm like, oh, second nature.
You know, with you though, like I think, because it's funny, because if you don't know the backstory, Garrett actually hired Ani when he was more heavily involved in the business. And he goes, Ani will replace me. And I was like, she seems spicy. I don't know. But what's so funny is I think he saw in you what he probably saw in himself. And even though you were like, oh, I wasn't at that level, I couldn't do it, you had the capability of doing it. Like he saw that trainer Ani in you, right? And it's very different than trainer Danielle. Like you have a different beast in you. Like you're like this tiny little Puerto Rican, but like you not demand, I don't know how to like describe this. Like you can get on a call with somebody and you can just hold the frame really well. You know what I mean? And you're like, okay, where are we at? Like you're a very good coach, but that took a lot of repetition, right?
Massive
But
repetition.
what I want to say is like you were that person, but you had to work on it to get to the level where you're at.
It's almost like refining something.
Right.
Like, what's that saying? Something about like wiping the shit off something? Wipe the dirt off the diamond, even though I know that's really not it. There's a saying that actually goes with this. But really, I had to also be okay with not being good.
Yeah.
But also, I feel the thing that kept pushing me is going back to the original conversation of like, it was my passion. I knew before I came here, like I was meant to train somewhere.
Right.
Somehow, like that was my calling, but I never found the thing that I loved. Like I was gonna train for another company and like start into like their program, and I looked into it and I was like, but it don't, like I like the idea of training and helping people, but that doesn't call to me.
Right.
And then when I learned about NBR and BMS and I joined, it was like
This calls to me.
one path, one vision, like there was nothing else. It was like the thing that I was gunning for.
Right.
So that made it not easy. I mean, it was really, really difficult to get to this point. I
think,
got yelled at a few times.
It's so funny because I even like look at my Bailey.
My Bailey.
My Bailey, she'll be 14 next week, and I just find that she's like that girl that could be talented at whatever she does. She's super athletic. She was like in running. She was in volleyball. She's a phenomenal vocalist. Like she plays guitar. She plays piano. Like she's not into anything right now. She's just, and I'm like, Bailey, what are you passionate about? Like I'm like, I need you to find your passion, because to me it's like she's coming across like just kind of defeated and lazy. And it's like I'm like, if you find your passion, I want to see my Bailey back. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and I think people get distracted, and I'll say social media is like a big thing that we, and Bailey might also be that person, where it's almost being distracted by like, oh, well, if I get the attention and the likes and the comments and I post pretty photos, then that will give me purpose, but it doesn't.
It doesn't. It gives you like an excitement for like a minute. You're like, oh my God, lots of likes. Oh my God. But
Or it does
fades
the
out.
opposite, and it fucking breaks you down when you post something and you don't get like the results or like the feedback you thought you would get. Then you're like, oh my God, I'm not pretty, I'm not good at this, I'm ugly, my clothes are stupid, I did the
Right.
wrong thing, and it almost like backfires in your face. So it's like, yes, find your passion, but also don't get distracted by shit that doesn't matter. And don't get me wrong, I love social media, I love the photo shoots that we do, they're super fun. I have my next one like next week.
I think there's a balance though in it, right?
Yes.
I mean, everybody gets sucked down the social media rabbit hole. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And I would say usually I'm pretty good. Like I post and I'm like, see you later. You know what I mean? And then every once in a while, I'll be like, I'll get, down the little rabbit hole and whatnot.
I hate when that
but
happens.
But
to me.
I got to this place where I was like, you know what? The amount of energy it like pulls from you. I'm like, I got so busy with what I was passionate about with other things that I'm like, I don't have time. And so it became something where like I wake up every morning. I don't know if you notice, I post at like 7:30 every morning.
I always know when you're awake.
I know. I wake up and
it.
it's like I have my post all ready to go, and I'm like, and then I like go about my day, right? And it doesn't really distract me that often anymore. Like it used to distract me more, and now I'm like, oh, I got to post. It's been a couple days or whatever. You know what I mean?
Well, and I also feel that I just actually got off a call with one of our artists who she's like, gosh, she goes, I have such a hard time posting because I don't want it to seem like I'm bragging. I don't want it to be like, ooh, look at all the cool things I've done. I'm like, but also you've done some really cool shit. And it's so hard, I think, sometimes to get out of that mindset of like, oh, if I post this, and they're going to be like, this bitch, who does she think she is? But I'm like, who gives a fuck?
Yeah.
I go, honestly, like, if you try to make everybody happy, the only person that's going to be unhappy is you.
You know, it's so funny. Garrett goes in and out of phases with his social media.
Oh, I know. Girl,
and it was so funny because I talked him into doing some photo shoots with me, and he has like his nice suits on, and he's like in his Lambo, and he's like doing it, and then he has some casual stuff. I'm like, oh, you look so good, babe. And he had somebody else take over social media, and it was great. And he was like, I'm tired of. He said something to me one day. He goes, I'm tired of that guy. And I go, why? You fucking earned that guy. I'm like, that is you. I'm like, you earned that outfit. You earned that car. I'm like, that's you. So even though you feel like you're being showy on your social media or whatever it is, you earned that. And you have a backstory that nobody else can touch. I'm like, so own that piece of you. And he was like, yeah, okay, you're right. But I think he was like, I think sometimes we think like, oh, I don't want to be too showy. And like, I get it, but at the same time, it's like, I work hard for this. So like,
busted my fucking ass to be here.
So this is me, and you can like Danielle podcast style in a ball cap, but guess what? I'm also gonna get on some angel wings and do some photos on the beach or whatever I want. Like both sides are me. And I don't know how this wraps back around to...
But even, I'm just going to say one more thing, but even it's like Danielle always says, because I'm definitely, I don't think I'm like a tomboy, but I think I like my Docs and I like my Chucks and kind of like grungy sometimes, but also... Inner me is a pageant baby. Like, give me the big ball gowns, all the hair, the makeup, the photos. I'm all in.
But I felt you didn't want to let her out, and now you're slowly letting her out. Like before,
girl, the
you
door
were
is open. I don't give a fuck.
That's what I'm saying, though.
Yeah.
You used to be like, oh, I can't let that side of me out.
And you know what? For me, it was also, and I guess, thinking about it, it was also like, I come from like a smaller town in Missouri. They don't do that there. And I'm like, okay, but you're not that person. You don't live there. So I'm like, give me the ball gowns. Let's motherfucking do this. I wore a G-string on a beach for a photo.
You know what's so funny about those photos? So we have a client of ours. She's a phenomenal photographer.
So good.
And she literally showed up one time with the real like Victoria's Secret angel wings, and I was like, oh my god, those are awesome. And Ani's like, yeah, I booked a shoot, and I was like, good for you. And then of course I was like, I want to book a shoot.
The next day she's like, do you care if I book a shoot?
And then you know who else booked a shoot is my friend Stephanie.
Yeah.
And I go, I loved her, and she goes, I'm like, are you gonna post it, Steph? And she goes, I'm nervous. And I'm like, Steph, you earned those wings. I was like telling her, I'm like, and she goes, I know. I'm like, share your story. I'm like, post it and share your story, because she got like married young. She's divorced now, but she like went through med school. Like she has like a gnarly story. And I was like, no, you fucking earned those wings. Like you post it, tell your story.
Dude.
Like, and it was like a really like inspiring post. I was like,
but you know what? I get it, because before I posted mine, I literally sat there and I was like, oh my god, are you about to?
Right?
That's a lot of skin on your page, girl. You don't normally do that. And I'm like, maybe. I'm like, no, I did it. I'm posting it. Fuck it, we in it now. And I posted it, and I literally put my phone down. I was like, I don't think I can go look for a while, because it made me sweat.
Sweaty. I have a few from my fitness competition. I'm like, wow, I posted
It's a lot of under boob, Danielle.
I knew you were gonna say that. Even me, I'm like, whoo. I'd be like, and you know what's so funny is I'd be like, Garrett, I don't think. He's like, no, you post that shit. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, you're even like telling me to, and you're my husband. But it's like, to me, it was like, it represented like just how hard I had worked, and I was like, okay, fuck it. Like, it's a good story. And so it's like, I feel like we have this other side of ourselves.
Yeah.
That it's okay to let that person out, or to let that person show up. You know what I mean? Because you might
don't box yourself in to the one version of yourself you think you have to be.
Right.
No one said you couldn't be everything and do everything. So we are coming to the end of our podcast now, unfortunately. It was 30 minutes of potpourri. A lot of things happened in this 30 minutes.
It's so funny because Ani goes, what do you want to talk about? I'm like, I went to church yesterday. It was really good. She goes, I don't want to talk about church. I was like, well, it's not about church. It's about like that high in life or finding your purpose. Like you literally, the pocket. That's all I'm going to say. Like you got to live your life in the pocket, because that's what we're meant to be doing, is like finding your passion and letting that really push you forward in life to become the human being that you're meant to be. So thank you guys for listening to our array of random things today. We will see you guys next.
Well, and just so you guys know, we are going to be releasing public classes come February, along with finally open enrollment into DKW Styling Academy. If you are interested and you want more information, go to nbr.education, and there is tons of education on all of our classes and things like that. And if you put in your email, you will be the first. Even if you've done it before, it doesn't matter. This is a brand new wait list, so be sure to put your email in and you'll be notified first of classes.
I'm going to do one more plug, because I've actually get a lot of questions about this. People are like, I'm like, the Academy is a 1-year program that's both virtual and in person. And at the end of it, you're a licensed MBR artist. So that's what the Academy is. I've had a ton of people who are like, well, how do I get in? Last year, you had to get an invitation through one of our smaller nationwide classes. This year, for the first time, we're going to be doing open enrollment. So think of it as like your master's program after you go and get your cosmetology license. So we're super excited about it. Stay tuned. Next month, more education will be released, and make sure that you're on our email list. I always release information to my email list first before I post it on social media. So anyways, tune in next week, and we'll see you guys next week.